You're against 2 Riichi and there are no safe tiles. AP is Suji, 1S is 1 chance. What will you discard? Recently, I've encountered 2 case studies that I find very interesting to illustrate why is it so difficult to actually learn from AI. If you happen to know the player that is being featured in this video, please keep them to yourself. This video is meant to be educational purpose, rather than criticizing or shaming a particular player's play. Back to this topic, have you decided what will you discard? There are probably only 4 options that you choose from here. 8P being Suji, 1S being 1 chance, 8S also being Suji, and Haku being an honor tile. Naturally, you are going to check with AI, correct? For this situation, we will take a look at what Maka said. Maka chose 1S here, while the player in the picture discarded 8P. They are rather close. They are quite close. It's only 34 versus 26. But why? If you are an intermediate player, how will you infer these decisions? And I think this is where the tricky thing is that depending on what decisions that you are guessing, you might be learning the wrong thing from AI. If you're trying to learn this by yourself and you are an intermediate player and just started applying all the new theories that you have learned, for example, in this scenario, you might have learned about 1 chance and you might have learned about Suji, and you also learn about the Suji tile on Riichi is more dangerous than a regular Suji. But do you know the extent of this Riichi Suji tile in comparison to 1 chance? I do have a statistics of a deal rate of Suji, which is around 4 to 4.5%. But if the Suji tile is based on the Riichi discarded tile, it is 4.7 to 5.6. So it is only around 1.5 percentage points difference. In comparison, what about 1 chance dealing rate? It is around 7 to 8%. So if you do not know the actual result of it, you might accidentally learn the wrong thing by thinking that 1 chance is safer than this kind of Suji. And that's not true. So I'm going to explain why 1S is a safer discard than AP here. Not just because it is 1 chance, it's because you have 2 of them. And that is the main reason. This is because of the concept called compounded risk. If you have 2 of them, you are able to last 2 turns. If you discard 8P here, risking around 5% chance, what is the next tile you're going to discard? It might be another Suji, right? For example, 8S. That is another 5%. So you are risking 2 5% tiles in these 2 turns. Now, without going into the specific math, it is around overall dealing rate of 9%. If you want to avoid the math, just plus the 5% as a gauge, 10%. So as you can see, this overall dealing rate is actually higher than pushing this 1S that has a dealing rate of around 7.5%. Not to mention, this 1S 1 chance is actually safer than an average 1 chance. The figures I give just now is more of an average. That means it's all kinds of tiles of 1 chance. 1S 1 chance being 2 tiles is less likely to get hit by Shampoo as well. But what about 8S? You can see that 8S and 8P are actually rather similar. These WWYD situations was actually discussed quite extensively in my own community. It was quite argued that 8S is safer than 8P. Or if the player wants to drop 8P, he should drop 8S. And I forgot to mention that this player in this screenshot is actually Sentry. So we're not discussing things that even Sentry will have difficulties in making the correct judgment here. Some of the players was arguing that 8S is definitely safer than AP. Now, 8S is usually safer in this context in the sense that it is a post-Riichi Suji, which is around 1 percentage point safer than the Riichi Suji. But the problem is that your 8S is more likely due into both players. It can be both bad shapes. But for 8P, this bad shape due in is not so likely for Kamicha. Because if you have 779P, you are not going to Riichi with 7P for 8P. You're going to take Shampoo. That's the most standard play that we expect any players to do. Because waiting on 2 kinds of tiles, you have more chance of setting up Suji trap after Riichi. And players are also generally more wary of discarding tiles right beside the tile that is discarded to Riichi. So 8S has this higher risk of double dueling in, and therefore it is still ranked a bit lower than AP. And of course, we haven't discounted the fact that this Riichi tile with 5P, it may not be 579 to begin with. Because this duelers Riichi is in the context of someone else has already Riichi. Right? If you have 5P in your hand, you simply is not discarding it because it is too dangerous. So it's not that this 5P is really the Riichi tile Suji. It has no choice but to move his hand in that manner. it does not give you a higher probability that, oh, this player must have a shape of 579, and he's discarding it from that. If he has it, then that is pure coincidence, because he can't discard 5p anyway. So in conclusion, what we have to learn from this AI decision is not about the one chance, and it's not about the safety level of the tile, but it's actually the compounded risk of having two tiles that can buy you time if you have no other safe tile. So this actually goes against what we have been learning. We're learning to always discard the tile that has the lowest dealing rate first. If you have a good takeaway from this, please remember to like this video and subscribe this channel for more. Here's the second case study. It's going to be against a player who opens the hand. So I will play a video to show you how the open hand was progressed. Shimuja Pong's 9S and discarded S here. And then a Hatsupong and discard Chun. S is a 怎么 Pei Pong and discard 3S. Now, at this stage, what do you do? Given that there's two Dora, will you push one S and try for like perhaps a Tanyao hand? Will you do something like 7M that is more in the middle, not knowing whether you should throw the Souzu? Will you discard 1P, 3P? Before we go into in-depth discussions, let's take a look at what Naga suggests to do here for all models. Most models actually pick 1S, except for two models. One of the two models pick 7M, the other model is kind of split. Now I'll show you the one that is split. But even though it's split, it is still marginally on 1S. So effectively, only one model picked 7M, which is the Hikapari model. The Hikapari model is actually the Menzen style, which actually makes sense because it's not actually looking to open this hand. If you're not looking to open this hand via Tanyao, because, for example, if you drop 4P, then this hand is very clear Tanyao route. And that's when you can call, you can pong your 7M, you can pong your 2S. So the question here is that which style should you adopt in these particular situations? To answer this question, we actually have to dissect a lot of what should be the gameplay here and what is the limitation of AI and what AI is actually thinking. First of all, let's dissect the hand. Based on the data that I've studied before, at turn 5 with 3 mels, we are at around 75% Tenpai rate. However, Naga actually thinks that the Tenpai probability is slightly more than 50%. It looks more like 55%. And I think that skews how this model will think about push-pull. If this model thinks that the Tenpai probability is low, then it's more likely to push. So this is the part that you have to be careful when looking at AI answers. You have to look at all the other parameters that it's also seeing that arrive to its own judgment. In fact, Naga also knows that among all the tile, 1S is the most dangerous. Player Pong pay and discard 3S. Typically, the read will be as of these shapes. You have 6 shapes in total that you will be reading from. I'm not going to consider the, based on hindsight, from 1-3S, then from Tenpai to Tenpai kind of shape. Usually that's not very common, although we should give some attention to that, given that the 3 males are already terminal tiles. It is quite possible that he wants to go for a Tanki weight. But let's discount that and focus on the more immediate read that we can do, which is these 6 shapes. Out of these 6 shapes, there are 2 shapes that will lead to a deal in, which is the first 2. But it is actually not 6, but 5, because one of the shapes we can eliminate, which is the 3-4-4. Do you notice the 4S here that was discarded previously? These calls were made so immediate, there isn't much time that the player can form any new sets. There's no way that he can form a pair 4S after this 4S was dropped, unless he skipped the pong itself, which is not likely, because it already looks like this guy has so many pairs to pong. So 3-4-4 is definitely out. We are left with 5 shapes. Therefore, the 1S doing rate is out of this 5 shape, 2 of it, which is 40%. Now, if you multiply by the Tenpai probability, if Naga gives it like a 55%, this 40% becomes around 20%. You can give some discount, and by saying that your read may not be correct, basically the nature of discard reading, it might not be as accurate as you want to think. There are a lot more situations that may not have come. So let's discount it and give a net doing rate of 15%. From a Naga's point of view, 15%, 2 Shanten, 2 Dora's hand, it might justify a 1S push. But if you treat this as 75% Tenpai probability, then your doing rate is going to be 20%. At 20%, 2 Shanten hand, bad weight, should we really push this hand? If I were to apply analog reading on this, I will pretty much put him on 90% Tenpai. Or at least this 1S should not be released without hesitation. If you try to backtrack his hand, this is pretty much how his starting hand looks like. And given that this 3S was late to release, it is not a very good tile to keep for any toy. And based on what we have learned from the 6 shape just now, you can pretty much assume he has extra 1 or 2 more Souzu tiles in this hand. So you're left with 2 or 3 tiles that is not Souzu. It could be a random pair, so you end up being a Toi Toi and Haku hand, but you definitely will not release 8S so quickly, right? If it's just only 2 pairs, you hope to pair the 8S and move towards holding Toi Toi. Even though his hand is so good, like the second tile being 8S, we really cannot deny the possibility that he is on Honitsu, mainly because the third Mel, which followed by a 3S discard, shows that he still has Souzu in his hand. That's why I feel that in this particular situation, Naga is quite wrong. One, his probability rating is lower than the data. Second, he's not reading discard the way that I think it should be read. I think this is the limitation of any AI models. They cannot be programmed to discard rate to that extent. There are certain times that I'm able to pinpoint weights of a 4 tiles open hand, but Naga cannot. Naga will still push the AK hand even though the last Suji was not passed to that 4 tiles hand. Things like that. So I personally will not vouch for this 1S. I think Naga is wrong here based on the parameters, because the parameters itself is also wrong. I will advocate 7M here. This is to buy time. You already have 2 of them. It's very hard for him to have the remaining 2 tiles to get a Toi Toi. Like, you can say that he set up a Suji trap 4M and then run you a Toi Toi. But even then, that is 5.2k. That's the worst case scenario. But 1S doing might be a lot more disastrous. It can be 12k or it can even be 16k. And in this case, it is a jackpot 16k. There are few ways of progressing this hand after discarding 7M. If you draw in 1 or 2S first, you can drop 3p. If you draw in 2p, you push 2S first. At that time, you might even realize that 2S becomes safe. Because if Shimocha is tanky 2S and he draw in like a 1S or draw in some honor tile, he can tanky that tile for Honroto. So he might just switch it out and make 2S safe afterwards. But if he's on tanky 1S, this 1S will never be out. The bottom line is that you can buy time to see whether which tile that you want to throw is going to be dangerous, and there's some time for you to make it safe. Even if it's not safe, there is still sufficient reason to push this 2S. Because your doing rate is going to be like 20%. And at least you are now on Ramen Ishan, then Oyamangan. So this hand is still playable, but definitely at 2 Shanten, you have to be a bit more careful. Just imagine that a player would deal into this and start looking at Naga and justify that the play is correct. I think this is where learning from AI can be quite misleading and is so confusing to so many players. At the end of the day, it is more important to try to understand the different models' reasoning rather than trying to validate whether your play is correct or not. Unless you see a very extreme, like all models has a very extreme high bar saying this tile should go, then yes, most likely the AI is correct. But when you have different models giving you different answers, the human factor has to come into play. By human factors, I mean that reading your opponent well. After all, AI are based on large samples of data. How many samples of data does he have from these specific situations? AIs are programmed to give you decisions based on probability. And it is human to try to adjust it
and it is the analog reasoning from humans to try to assess whether we can beat AI by applying a conditional probability. So that when we assess our doing rate or win rate, it should be more accurate than AI's average value. Now, of course, I'm not denying that AI is also doing its own kind of conditional probability, but that's part of the model improvement. It may not be as accurate as human beings in certain situations. I hope this video gives you a bit more different perspective on AI and how we should utilize it and how we should learn from it. It is not an easy tool to use, and we must always remember that it is a good reference, but not a source of Bible. Let me know in the comments what do you think of this. If you're curious to learn more about AI and what I think about them, I have another video on AI here, and I'll see you there.